Hi, I'm Patricia Greenberg, and we are here talking about all things aging well. My guest today is Stephen Gunzenhauser, and he's the author of the recently released Travels with Stephen, the most famous unknown conductor. Stephen was born in Queens, New York to immigrant parents and attended the High School of Music and Art, went on to earn a bachelor's of music from Oberlin College and a master's of music at the New England Conservatory. Welcome, Stephen.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here, Patricia.
Stephen, I want to start out by saying my husband and I still appreciate classical music. We attend the Hollywood Bowl Summer Series every year, and I'm happy to report we're usually in the company of a big sold out crowd. So, as much as we think classical music is dying and people aren't listening, there's still, thank God, a huge audience for it. And the genius behind classical music and the discipline to study and learn and absorb these pieces in all of their glory puts you in a category all by yourself. Talk to us about how you gravitated towards being a conductor.
Well, let me start by saying the use of the term classical immediately limits the audience
Okay.
because it's not classical music, what happens at the Hollywood Bowl, it's symphonic music. And there is a difference. But to get to how I gravitated, when I was 4 years old, my mother was good friends with the granddaughter of Richard Wagner. And that is a story completely on its own because Friedrich Wagner refused to return to Germany unless Hitler got rid of the Nuremberg laws, which are the laws against Jews. And Hitler was embarrassed because Wagner was his favorite composer, and here was the granddaughter of Richard Wagner living in the United States. When she refused to return, there were 3 assassination attempts made on her life, and
Wow.
she wrote a book about it. But she was friends with my mother. And to get back to the original question, when I was 4 years old, my mother was introduced me to Friedlin. Friedlin looked at me and she said to my mother, Stephen hat eine musikalische Hinterkopf, which is Stephen has back of the head, he's going to be a conductor. And my mother thought that was ridiculous that I was going into my dad's business. At 4 years of age,
Right.
I could have been a cowboy or a fireman. But that was the discussions that went on. My mother played piano. When the piano tuner came to fix the piano for my mother, I had just started clarinet. My mother could not play along because she couldn't transpose. So she had the piano tuner tune the piano to B flat so that she could play along with me. The poor piano tuner must have gone nuts having to do something like. At any rate, that's sort of how I got into music. I love music. I went to a junior high school that was in the middle of gang wars between Italians and African Americans, at that time, Blacks. And at the end of that period, my choice of schools would have been Newtown High School in Queens. But Fiorello LaGuardia, who was a mayor of New York, had these 5 major public high schools, one of which was music and art. And I auditioned for music and art, and it was probably tougher to get into than Oberlin, but
Yeah.
I was accepted. It was an hour-and-a-half subway ride each way, and it was wonderful. And I loved music. And my dad kept saying, well, you need to study more chemistry for my business. And I kept saying, yes, next year, next year. It was always next year. So, and that went on until probably 2000, when I was already 20 years music director of the Lancaster Symphony, and I dedicated the Beethoven's Ninth to my dad, who was able to attend the performance. And he finally accepted the fact that I wasn't going into his business.
Yeah. Yeah. I was going to say that would have been a lifelong. I'm sure he was proud of you in any event. So,
I
yeah.
think he was, although he kept saying, Musik ist eine brotlosen Kunst. Music is an art that you don't get paid for. You know, it's something that people appreciate and love, but you're not going to make a living doing that. Come into the business.
Yeah, that is a very common, problem with immigrant parents. And, and I wanted to ask you about that also, about, their background playing a role in your professional choices. And I commend you for, I commend you for taking that love that you had and that discipline and following through, because so many people reach an age in their lives where they're miserable. I should have, this is not what I wanted to do. I'm here running a business for my parents and it wasn't what I wanted. So that you followed your dream and you went through with it, is amazing. I want to talk to you about the joys and the diversity of experiences as a classically trained conductor.
Yes. Well, I've been very
There's so
lucky.
much to talk about. I don't even know where to start. But
we need a series. What
We
is
need
it
a
like
series.
the television series?
Absolutely. So in 1969, you joined the American Symphony in New York under the tutelage of Maestro Leopold Stokowski. That's an amazing honor. How did that come about?
I had one of the most famous conductors in the world was a man named Igor Markevich, and his recordings are positively brilliant. He should have been named music director of Chicago, but for a series of events, he didn't. But he had been music director of the ballet company, Maurice Béjart, that did the original first performance of Stravinsky's Rite of Spring. And he was music director of over 35 different orchestras. I was his assistant in Monte Carlo for a year. He was good friends, even though he didn't get the Chicago Symphony, he was very good friends with Stokowski. And so he arranged for my return from Monte Carlo as his assistant to be Stokowski's assistant in New York.
Wow. Wow. That's amazing.
He was wonderful.
Now, the name of your book is Travels with Stephen, and you've had guest appearances more than 100 countries, 100 orchestras, excuse me. Tell us about that. Tell us about that life.
Well, it's interesting because the question arises, who raised my children?
Yeah.
And I have to give credit to my wife to be able to juggle her own career, as well as helping both our daughters to grow. And basically it was a telephone relationship at one point, that I would call. This was before cell phones,
right?
And when it was expensive, I would still call and try to deal with whatever I could deal with, whether I was in Vienna or whether I was in Bratislava or wherever I was in the world, or Bogota, Colombia. I mean, I've had the option of being most every place. The only places I really haven't conducted are Australia and New Zealand. And interesting, I was offered a remarkable opportunity to conduct in China. And my wife said to me, Stephen, don't go, because if you go, you're going to get sick. It's too long a trip. And I said, oh, no, I could go. They were offering a great deal of money. And I chose to listen to my wife, and I didn't go. But it turns out the city where I was engaged was Wuhan.
Oh,
and
my
it was
goodness.
the outbreak of it. This was a year before that my wife told me not to go.
Yeah. Wow.
And I turned them down and I didn't go. But that's where COVID started.
Isn't that something? Isn't that something?
For once in my life, I really turned down an engagement because of my wife's urging.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And so did you take your children with you on any of these excursions along the way?
I took my oldest daughter when I went to Costa Rica to conduct, and my wife, of course, and she was 18 months old.
Oh, wow.
My daughter. And I went over to start dress rehearsal for the performance. My wife was on the third floor, and she went outside the room to look for the babysitter. My lovely daughter ran and locked the door and then sat down on the bed. And Shelley said, Marissa, open the door. And she said, I don't know how. And the whole hotel heard my wife entreating or hoping to get Marissa to open the door. They finally sent a bellhop from the next room across the fire escape into the room to open the door. And Marissa, who at that time was 18 months old, thanked him in Spanish.
Oh my goodness, that is
And
so
we didn't even
funny.
know, she just picked it up by ear. We didn't even
Yeah,
know what she was talking about. We thought it's gobbledygook.
that's so funny.
Yes.
And they turned out to be very love music as well, right? The kids.
Yes, the older daughter, of course, works for a very famous Hollywood composer, Bear McCreary,
Uh-huh.
who did things like Walking Dead and Black Sails, Godzilla, and a few others like that. My youngest daughter is a marketing executive, and they both live in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
My youngest daughter became a social media guru because she got started in social media when it was brand new in 1999.
So she got the head start.
She
So
had a head start. Yeah.
yeah, now so traveling obviously is the greatest gift that you can give to yourself. What are your favorite cities? Anything really stand out for you?
Yes, a few places stand out for me. Budapest, which is absolutely wonderful and remarkable. Belgrade in Serbia is also remarkable. Santiago, Chile, and Buenos Aires, Argentina. Those are cities that I really love.
Did you ever feel unsafe in your travels?
No,
Oh,
no, I figured whatever was going to be was going to be. Funny instance in Bogota, uh, I was in Bogota when Pablo Escobar was quite active, and I went into what was called the Zona Rosa to eat dinner at a specific restaurant. My wife knew the restaurant that I was going to. I left the restaurant, came back to the hotel, and about 45 minutes later, two guerrillas on a motorcycle threw a grenade into that restaurant, killing 4 or 5 people. My wife could not reach me on the telephone because she was worried that I was in that
sure,
restaurant
sure.
when it happened. But I guess you could say stupid is smart,
Yeah.
but somehow I managed to not be frightened. I was going to go where the opportunities presented themselves.
And you're here to tell the tales. I think it's
And
fabulous.
yeah, I finished doing a lot of conducting during the winter in Lancaster, but my music festival has grown. So in the meantime, I have a lot of paperwork and organizational things that I have to do for the music festival. But then I decided to sit down and write the book so that Shelley wouldn't have to hear the stories all over again.
Yeah. So, it's your recordings number more than 80. And in 2003, you were nominated for a Grammy.
Well, I was I wasn't nominated for the Grammy. The recording that I
Recording.
conducted
Okay. Okay.
nominated for the Grammy.
So what goes into that? So tell us a little bit about, there's your live conducting, your recording, tell us about the life of a conductor.
Well, recordings are completely different than live performances. And you could liken the whole situation to that of a chef. And a chef prepares a great meal. The only problem is when you're finished eating it, there's just the memory of it, but
Yeah.
there's nothing lasting. And that's where making a recording is completely different because whatever you do winds up forever uh, on the recording so that you can always have it. I did the 9 symphonies of Dvorak with the Slovak Philharmonic. I still have them and I can still listen to them. And they're on the Symphony number 9, the slow movement, New World Symphony, is on my website.
Wow. Wow.
Alongside Carmina Burana of Karl Orff, which was used at the opening of the film The General's Daughter with John Travolta. And then also on there is Tchaikovsky's Fifth Symphony, I think the first movement, which was the best-selling Tchaikovsky recording in Moscow in 1989.
So there is so much to learn about symphonies and how they were written, why they were written, and delving into the composer's mind and what they were thinking at the time. What point in your life did you study that? Was that in college, or was that
well,
just part of, like,
well, Friedland said to my mother, Stephen shouldn't concentrate on the piano. He should concentrate on an instrument. And my instrument was clarinet.
Oh,
And so I went to Oberlin actually as a double major, organic chemistry for my dad, and clarinet. But Oberlin also at the time had a junior year abroad, which was in Salzburg, Austria. So with the class, the entire class went to Salzburg to the Mozarteum. And at the Mozarteum, I studied conducting with a Professor Wimberger. And it's like the curtain lifted up and said, this is really clarinet is lovely, but being a conductor, you're shaping the entire sound, not just your own instrument. And so that became very appealing.
So you went in already fluent in German.
Yes and no.
Mhm.
I went when my wife says sarcastically, I had a deprived childhood because in the summers, my parents sent me and my sister to Switzerland
Oh,
for languages. I wanted to stay home and play stoop ball.
yeah.
Whereas my parents, my parents never spoke any language but English at home.
Okay.
They needed English was their third language, German was their first language, Spanish was their second language, and then came English. So they sent my sister and I to Switzerland to learn French and German. And
Amazing.
I was 12 years old. I played tennis with John Rubinstein, the son of Arthur Rubinstein. My best friend was the son of the secretary to the king of Greece, Panagiotis Kanellakis. And so I became familiar with Greek as well as English. And then we had another friend, Felipe Trugosa de Almeida, who was Portuguese royalty. It was a wonderful time. And I can only say that in hindsight, not when it was
Oh, yeah. At
happening.
the time, who wanted to be there? Kids don't want to do what their parents want them to do. It's amazing.
Yes,
So, um,
exactly.
and we know now that this gets ingrained in your psyche as a young person and it stays with you forever. And those are the wonderful things that you can go back and rely upon and recall as you age. So it's
Yes.
fantastic.
Yeah,
Um,
it was
so
wonderful.
yeah. So I also, this is an interesting thing that you had brought up a little bit. While Europe is the basis for quote unquote classical music, what separates American conductors from the European counterparts?
I think the best answer to that is if you look at the population. The population is monochromatic. In Germany, it's mostly German. In France, it's mostly French. In other countries, it's primarily the folk base. The United States, we are confronted daily with diversity,
Yeah.
all kinds of diversity, and also diversity in our music, diversity in our languages, and diversity in our population. So that an American conductor, I think, brings a great deal more to the podium than a European conductor because they bring all kinds of experiences that would be not available to the European conductor. I've had to conduct some programs in Europe that I thought were outright dull
Hmm.
because because they were very classically trained. Give you one example, Patricia. There's a tune called the Moldau, which is a very famous tone poem by composer Smetana. Well, the tone poem was the second of six. There's one, two is famous, then three, four, five, six. The others are not so famous, but they're also not so good. And that's the reason why number two is famous. But with the Northwest German Philharmonic, I had to do all six tone poems as the offering. Now, I can't think of anything that is more dull than that. And you could say that was a classical program.
Mhm, mhm.
Now, I do a program coming up, my opening concert in Wellsboro, this coming up this summer. I'm doing a Madras Symphony, number 13, by American composer Henry Cowell, who traveled to India. And so he did all kinds of things in his symphony, which are Indian based and Indian inspired. I'm doing a work by a Greek American composer, George Santakis, who wrote a work called Laconica. But I'm also doing the Pennsylvania premiere of a work that Jeffrey Beagle from Brooklyn College in New York commissioned from a composer, Peter Boyer, and it's called Rhapsody in Red, White, and Blue. And so he has made it his project to perform this particular work in all 50 states. And he has received commitments for all 50 states. And the festival is doing his Rhapsody in Red, White, and Blue in Pennsylvania premiere.
Amazing. So did you have to jump around now? You have pieces that's Indian inspired and Greek inspired. So the instruments must change.
No, Henry Cowell wrote the work for standard
Oh,
orchestra.
okay. Mm-hmm.
He did write some percussion parts, but the percussion players have to simulate the sound
Okay.
rather than actually doing the sound. But the purpose of all of it, Patricia, is to be able to create people going to a concert not knowing that it's a classical concert,
Okay.
knowing that it is to challenge, to entertain, and to inspire. And that is coming together of a group of talented musicians to be able to present music that is appealing.
Absolutely. You know, the world has changed and it feels like no one seems to have patience for anything anymore, right? To sit through anything. And how do we bring the American experience to classical music and keep it alive for future generations? It's something I'm concerned about.
But first of all, not calling it classical music,
Okay.
because that's like saying Broadway is only Shakespeare.
Yes, yes. Okay.
Okay,
Thank you for
so it's,
correcting me on that. Mhm.
no, I'm not
Yeah,
correcting
yeah,
you.
yeah. No, I
It's
understand. Yeah,
common usage. I even use it, so I have to correct
yeah.
myself. But it is symphonic music, and the symphonic music has a much wider scope and also much more appealing to American audiences than going to hear six-tone poems by Smetana.
I just have to tell you, Stephen, this is just so enlightening. What I want to ask you if there's any genre of music besides symphonic that you like to listen to just for fun.
When I drive my car, I love Aretha Franklin.
Ah,
And for example, at the
yeah, I have
festival,
her greatest hits CDs in my car also. That's funny you said
yes,
love her.
yeah,
Love
I
her.
love Aretha Franklin. And there is a library called Tim Barron's Library that has provided me for the festival with a work called Also Funk Zarathustra, which is
Wow.
the Richard Strauss Zarathustra, but it's done in funk style.
Oh, how
So,
interesting.
well,
Interesting.
that's what music is all about, curiosity. What we have found is that our younger audiences are very curious, but in some cases lazy.
Right,
So they want it fed to them, but they want a diverse offering fed to them that they can assimilate quickly.
right, right. The age-old discussion between generations.
Yes.
Stephen, there's so much more to talk about, and we're going to have you back at a future date. I want to thank you so, so much for being here. And I wish you many, many more years of success and more books and more
Well,
travel in your future. And in closing, I want to ask you, what do you like about getting older?
I love the fact that I can look back on a life well lived, and I can look back on a family that has stayed constant with me. I love my wife and her outright honesty. Some people have called her a force of nature. I love my two children and what they have done. And so it's a tight knit family, even though the miles separate us.
Mhm.
And I'm really thrilled to have completed the book, which hopefully will be available next week through Amazon, through Kindle, through Barnes and Noble. And hopefully people will inquire about it. And they can always go to my website, which is Stephen Gunzenhauser, GUNZENHAUSER.com.
And
So
we'll
that,
also post that on the link when we air the
oh,
show.
that would
So
be great. And I
yes,
would love to do a series of shows with you, Patricia,
absolutely,
because it
absolutely.
is so easy talking with you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Stephen Gunzenhauer, please go to his website, Stephen, STEPHEN GUNZENHAUSER.com. It's a mouthful, but we'll get that out to you. And I want to thank all of you for listening to my show today, where we talk about all things aging well. Please subscribe to my channel for more engaging discussions. And for feedback or show topic ideas, please contact me at www.patriciagreenberg.com. Thank you again, Stephen. And I look forward to seeing you at a future date.
Thank you very much, Patricia.